I spent 2 years in prison for a crime I didn't commit, not because the evidence was strong, not because the truth was unclear, but because my own son stood in court, looked the judge in the eye, and lied. They said I pushed his wife down the stairs. They said I killed my unborn grandchild. And while I rotted behind concrete walls, my son lived in my house, ran my company, and smiled for the cameras. Every month, they came to visit me, begging, pretending, playing family. I refused to see them every single time, because I wasn't broken. I was waiting, and the day those prison gates finally opened, I didn't walk out looking for forgiveness. I walked out with one phone call that would take everything they stole from me and leave them with absolutely nothing. Day 729. The walls of my cell were damp, stained with years of sweat, rust, and forgotten prayers. I counted time by scratches on concrete. 729. That was the number etched beside the leg of my iron cot, each line carved with the edge of my fingernail, each one a reminder that another day of my life had been stolen. Tomorrow, I would add the last mark. Tomorrow, after 2 full years, I would walk out of Dallas County Jail. I sat on the thin mattress, back against the wall, breathing air that smelled like old metal and regret. The Texas heat never really left this place. Even at night, it pressed down on you, heavy and suffocating, like it wanted to remind you who was in control. Before all this, I slept in a king-sized bed. Before all this, my name carried weight. Theodore Griffin, founder, CEO, a man who built a $70 million company from nothing but stubbornness and long nights. Now, I was just inmate A, 47239. I stared at my hands rougher, thinner than I remembered, and felt the anger stir again. Not wild anger. Not the kind that burns out fast. This was colder, because the memory that kept me awake at night wasn't the sentence. It was the courtroom. My son, standing straight, well-dressed, calm, swearing under oath that his own father was a monster. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the gates would open, and when they did, I wouldn't be stepping back into the world as the man they thought they destroyed. I would be stepping out as the man who remembered everything. The courtroom betrayal. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and quiet judgment. I stood at the defense table in a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit anymore, hands clasped behind my back, trying to understand how my life had collapsed into this single room. The judge sat high above us, unreadable. The jury watched me with polite distance, the way people look at something already decided. Then they called my son. Logan Griffin walked to the witness stand with confidence. Not arrogance, confidence. His suit was perfectly pressed, his hair neatly styled. He looked like a man who belonged there, like someone telling the truth. "I love my father," he said, voice steady, eyes shining just enough. "But I can't protect him from what he did." Each word hit harder than the sentence ever could. He described the day calmly, too calmly. How I was angry, how I yelled, how his pregnant wife fell. How he believed I pushed her. He never looked at me when he said it. Not once. Then his wife rolled in, seated in a wheelchair, hands folded over a stomach that was no longer round. Tears came easily for her, the kind that convinced strangers and cameras alike. I wanted to stand up, to shout, to tell them the truth that I'd gone to Logan's office that day to confront him about missing money, that I never touched her, that the security cameras malfunctioned at the exact wrong moment. But truth doesn't always survive performance. When the gavel came down, I didn't hear the sentence clearly. All I could see was my son turning to comfort his wife. And in that moment, just for a second, I caught it. Not guilt, calculation. 2 years behind concrete. Prison doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down in small, patient ways. The lights never truly went off. The air was always thick, sweat, bleach, something sour that never quite left the walls. Days blended together until time stopped feeling real. Breakfast trays slid through metal slots. Counts happened like rituals. Names disappeared, replaced by numbers. I learned quickly what mattered. Keep your head down. Watch everything. Trust no one. My cellmate, Carl, had been inside longer than he cared to remember. 63, quiet, sharp eyes. The kind of man who spoke only when there was something worth saying. "You won't survive on anger alone," he told me one night as we lay staring at the ceiling. "Anger burns fast." He was right, so I let the anger cool. I read everything I could get my hands on, finance magazines months out of date, law books with pages missing, anything that kept my mind moving forward while my body stayed trapped. I exercised until my muscles remembered discipline. I listened. Guards talked. Inmates bragged. Secrets slipped out when people thought no one important was paying attention. Every month, Logan requested visitation. Every month, I refused, not out of pride, out of strategy. I needed him comfortable, confident, believing I was finished. At night, I lay on my cot and replayed the trial not to torture myself, but to study it. Every lie, every gap, every face that looked away when the truth should have mattered. 2 years is a long time to wait, but patience, I learned, doesn't mean weakness. It means choosing the right moment. And my moment was coming. The visitation room. They came on a Thursday. Visitation days always smelled different cheap cologne, nervous sweat, desperation dressed up as concern. I was reading when the guard stopped at my cell and said the words I already expected. "Griffin, your family's here." I closed the book slowly. The visitation room was divided by thick plexiglass. On the other side sat my son and his wife, positioned carefully like they were waiting for a photographer. Logan wore a tailored suit that cost more than most inmates made in a year. His wife leaned into him, eyes red, hands folded like a grieving saint. I took the seat opposite them. "Dad," Logan said, lifting the phone. His voice cracked just enough. "It's good to see you." I didn't answer. He swallowed. "We've been taking care of everything while you've been away." Away. As if I'd gone on vacation instead of being buried alive. "The company is stable," he continued. "We've had to make some difficult decisions, but it's for the best." "For the best," I repeated quietly. His wife leaned forward. "We're family," she said softly. "We should heal." I looked at her. Really looked. No fear. No guilt. Only impatience. That's when it clicked. They weren't here out of love. They were here to extract something. "Sign the papers," Logan finally said, dropping the act. "Just temporary. A trust transfer." I smiled for the first time in 2 years. Not because it was funny, because now I knew exactly how this would end. Khi bạn sẵn sàng, chỉ cần nhấn phanh năm, part 5 sẽ là khoảnh khắc người cha từ chối ký, và chiến tranh chính thức bắt đầu. The signature I refused to give. Logan slid the folder closer to the glass. Thick. Expensive. My name already printed where the signature should go. "All you need to do is sign," he said, lowering his voice like we were sharing a secret. 2 million. Temporary. The auditors are coming, and without access to the trust, the company could collapse. I picked up the phone slowly. "You sent me to prison," I said, calm, flat. "And now you want my fingerprint." His jaw tightened. "This isn't about the past. This is about survival." "No," I replied. "This is about control." His wife leaned forward, irritation flashing before she could stop it. "Don't be dramatic. You're lucky we kept your name clean. The media could have destroyed you." I laughed. It surprised all three of us. "You framed me for murder," I said quietly. "And you think you did me a favor?" Logan's patience cracked. "You don't have a choice," he snapped. "Your accounts are frozen. You don't have access to anything. Without us, you leave here with nothing." I leaned closer to the glass. "Then I'll leave with nothing," I said. "But I won't leave with your lie on my hands." For the first time, fear flickered across his face. "You're making a mistake," he warned. I set the phone back in its cradle and stood. "No," I said. "I'm finally making a decision." As I walked away, I didn't look back. Behind me, I heard Logan shout my name. I didn't stop, because the moment I refused to sign, the war officially began. The day the gates opened. The gates opened at exactly 8:17 a.m. Sunlight spilled through the iron bars like something holy, blinding after 2 years under fluorescent lights. I stepped forward slowly, my eyes adjusting, my body remembering what it felt like to stand without chains. Outside, heat hit me first. Thick Dallas air, smelling of gasoline, sweat, and opportunity. Then the noise, cameras, microphones, voices calling my name like they'd always cared. "Mr. Griffin, how does it feel to be free? Do you forgive your son? Will you be returning home today?" I didn't answer. Standing just beyond the reporters was Logan. My son wore a navy blue suit, tailored perfectly. grief arranged carefully on his face. Beside him stood his wife in white, clutching a bouquet of roses like props in a play they'd rehearsed all night. "Dad," Logan called out loudly, for the cameras. "We're here for you. We're family." "Two." I walked past him, not around him, past him, like he was furniture. His hand shot out and grabbed my arm. "Don't do this," he hissed. "Get in the car. We'll fix everything." I looked down at his hand, then up at his face. "Let go," I said quietly, "or I'll scream that you're assaulting me in front of all these cameras." He released me instantly. That's when the engine sound cut through the chaos. Low, smooth, powerful. A black luxury car rolled to a stop at the curb. The driver stepped out, straightened his jacket, and opened the rear door for me. "Mr. Griffin," he said respectfully. "Everything is ready." Logan's face drained of color, because in that moment, he finally understood something. I hadn't walked out with nothing. I'd walked out prepared. Khi bạn sẵn sàng, chỉ cần nhấn 7. Part 7 sẽ là đòn phản công đầu tiên, nơi cán cân quyền lực bắt đầu đảo ngược hoàn toàn. The first move. The inside of the car smelled like leather and calm. The door closed with a soft, final thud, shutting out the reporters, the shouting, and my son's stunned face. For the first time in 2 years, there were no bars between me and the outside world. The man in the front seat met my eyes in the mirror. "Mr. Way." "Griffin," he said. "I'm Maxwell Brooks, your attorney." Attorney, not public defender, not court-appointed. I nodded once. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," he replied, "but enough if we move now." The car pulled away smoothly. Outside, Dallas slid past the tinted windows like a city that had kept moving while I was buried beneath it. Maxwell opened a slim folder and placed it on the seat beside me. "While you were incarcerated, emergency powers were granted to your son based on a claim of mental incompetence," he said. "Those powers expire the moment you contest them." I smiled faintly. "Then let's contest them," he nodded. "Already filed. The court order goes through in less than an hour." "And the company?" I asked. Maxwell's expression hardened. "We initiate a forensic audit. All corporate and personal accounts freeze immediately." I closed my eyes for a moment, not in relief, but in focus. "Do it," I said. "Cut him off from everything." "Yes, sir." The car turned onto the highway, the city skyline rising ahead of us. Behind those buildings were boardrooms, bank accounts, secrets, things my son believed were safely in his control. He was wrong. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was reclamation, and it had already begun. When the money vanished, the first sign came sooner than I expected. Maxwell's phone buzzed before we even reached downtown. He glanced at the screen once, then looked at me with a controlled calm that told me everything was already in motion. "Corporate accounts are frozen," he said. "Personal ones, too. Credit lines suspended. Cards will start declining within minutes." I leaned back in the seat, listening to the hum of the engine. "No warnings?" I asked. He shook his head. "None. Clean and immediate." That mattered. People like my son survived on preparation, on advance notice, on moving money before the doors closed. Taking that away was the real blow. Across town, Logan was probably still standing where I left him, phone in hand, smile fading, trying to reassure his wife that everything was fine. It wasn't. Maxwell tapped his tablet and turned the screen toward me. Bank confirmations, court filings, board notifications queued for delivery. "Once the audit is public," he added, "every transfer he's made in the last 2 years comes under scrutiny." I nodded. "Good. I want daylight." The car slowed at a red light. Through the glass, I watched people hurry along sidewalks, unaware that an empire was beginning to collapse behind closed doors. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A second buzz, then a third. Maxwell glanced at it. "Your son." I smiled faintly. "Let him wait," I said, because for 2 years I'd waited in a cell while he spent my money, lived in my house, and wore my name like armor. Now it was his turn to feel what waiting really meant, and this was only the beginning. When the walls started closing in, Logan called again, then again. By the 5th missed call, his confidence had curdled into something sharper, panic disguised as authority. Maxwell muted the phone and set it face down between us. He's realizing he can't move money, Maxwell said. Next comes denial. Then rage. I watched the skyline slip by. What comes after rage? Exposure. We arrived at the office tower just as the news alerts began to stack. A financial blog, first small, precise, deadly. Emergency audit announced at Sterling Industries. No accusations yet. Just facts. The kind that make investors sit up straighter. Maxwell opened his laptop. Board members are being notified. Some will call him. Others will call us. And the media? I asked. Give it an hour. Across town, Logan was learning what a locked door felt like. Assistants who once rushed to him now spoke carefully. Vendors asked for guarantees he couldn't provide. His signature, once a skeleton key, suddenly opened nothing. My phone vibrated again. This time, a text. Logan, please, just answer. I didn't. Maxwell slid a document across the table. There's more. Shell companies. Transfers routed through consulting fees. We're pulling the threads. I read names, dates, amounts, patterns that only make sense when someone thinks no one is watching. Release it, I said. Maxwell nodded. Staggered. Controlled. Each drop tightens the net. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere far below ordinary city noise. Inside, something extraordinary was happening. For 2 years, my son believed he'd buried me. Now, with every unanswered call and every frozen account, he was learning the truth. I wasn't buried. I was waiting. When the story changed hands, the headline went live at 11:42 a.m. Not on television. Not yet. It appeared quietly on a financial news site most people only noticed after it was too late. Sterling Industries announces emergency audit following wrongful conviction claim. No accusations. No drama. Just facts. But facts have a way of detonating when the fuse is money. Within minutes, analysts began asking questions. Why was the founder removed so quickly? Why were accounts frozen without warning? Why had the CEO assumed full control during the founder's incarceration? Maxwell leaned back in his chair. We've lost control of the narrative, he said calmly. I shook my head. No, he has. My phone finally rang. Logan, I answered this time. What did you do? He demanded, voice shaking beneath the anger. You're destroying everything. I didn't destroy anything, I replied evenly. I told the truth. You're making me look like a criminal. Silence stretched between us. Logan, I said softly. If the truth makes you look like a criminal, that's not my fault. I hung up. By the afternoon, television picked it up. Panels debated. Reporters speculated. The public, so quick to judge 2 years ago, began asking the question they should have asked back then. What if the old man was innocent? If you're still watching right now, this is a good moment to pause. Subscribe to the channel and share this story, because what happens next isn't just revenge, it's accountability. And stories like this only matter if they're heard. By sunset, my son had lost control of the story. And once you lose the story, you lose everything. The evidence no one could bury. The file didn't come from us. That was the part Logan never saw coming. Maxwell slid a slim envelope across the table late that evening. No letterhead, no return address, just a single handwritten initial on the corner. G. Inside was a flash drive and a folded medical report. I didn't touch it at first. Verified? I asked. Maxwell nodded. Multiple sources. Hospital records. Time-stamped. Authenticated. I opened the report slowly. The dates jumped out immediately. The miscarriage had occurred 2 days before the alleged fall. 2 days before my son's wife claimed I pushed her. 2 days before she sat in a wheelchair, crying on the witness stand. 2 days before my life ended. I closed my eyes. Not from relief. From the weight of knowing how deliberate the lie had been. She threw herself down the stairs, I said quietly. Yes, Maxwell replied. And the pregnancy had already ended. The medical intervention was concealed. I looked at the initial again. Who sent this? Maxwell hesitated. Someone inside the family. The next morning, the document went public. Not leaked, released. Medical experts confirmed it within hours. Commentators reversed themselves on air. Social media erupted with timestamps, screenshots, side-by-side comparisons of testimony versus truth. By noon, the narrative wasn't whether I was innocent. It was how far they'd gone to destroy me. My phone rang again. This time, Logan didn't shout. He whispered, "Dad, please." I stared at the screen and let it ring, because some truths, once exposed, don't need arguments. They finish the job on their own. When the world turned on them, by noon, there was nowhere left for them to hide. News vans lined the streets outside Sterling Industries. Headlines refreshed every few minutes, each one sharper than the last. Commentators who once called me a violent old man now spoke with outrage, demanding to know how the justice system had failed so completely. And at the center of it all, my son. Logan tried to hold a press conference. That was his final mistake. He stood behind a podium, jaw tight, eyes darting as reporters shouted questions he couldn't control anymore. "Mr. Griffin, did your wife lie under oath? Were you aware of the medical records? Did you knowingly send an innocent man to prison?" His wife stood beside him, pale and trembling, the practiced grief finally gone. When a reporter read the hospital dates out loud, she flinched. Logan raised his hands. "This is being taken out of context." The crowd erupted. Screens behind them flashed timelines, documents, expert analysis. The truth, laid bare and merciless. Someone shouted, "You ruined your father's life." Another voice followed, "For money." Logan's face collapsed in real time. The confidence drained. The mask slipped. Security stepped in as the questions turned hostile. By evening, sponsors withdrew. Board members resigned. Friends vanished. Their phones stopped ringing not because no one was calling, but because there was no one left who mattered. I watched it all in silence, not with satisfaction, with finality, because this wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was consequence. And consequences, once unleashed, don't ask for mercy. The boardroom that decided everything. The boardroom on the 40th floor was silent when I walked in. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the Dallas skyline, bright and indifferent, while 12 men and women sat stiffly around a polished table that had once belonged to me. Some avoided my eyes. Others watched carefully, calculating which side of history they were standing on. Logan wasn't there yet. Maxwell stood behind me, laptop open, documents queued like weapons laid out neatly before a battle. "As majority shareholder," I began calmly, "I'm calling this emergency session to order." A murmur rippled through the room. One board member cleared his throat. "Mr. Griffin, we were told you were no longer competent," I finished for him. "That claim has been legally revoked, along with every emergency power granted during my incarceration." The doors opened then. Logan stumbled in, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot. He looked smaller in this room than he ever had before. "You can't do this," he snapped. "I'm still the CEO." Maxwell clicked a button. The screen behind us lit up financial transfers, shell companies, consulting fees that led straight back to Logan's wife. Dates, amounts, signatures. "Embezzlement," Maxwell said evenly. "Wire fraud. Conspiracy." Logan turned to the board, desperate. "You all knew my father was unstable." I leaned forward. "You knew I was innocent," I said quietly. "And you took advantage anyway." Silence. Then a woman at the far end spoke. "I vote to remove Logan Griffin as CEO." One by one, hands rose. Logan's knees buckled slightly as security stepped forward. And in that moment, before he was escorted out, he finally understood the truth. He hadn't just lost a company. He'd lost every ally he thought he had. The one who never left. They cleared the room after Logan was escorted out. Board members gathered their papers quietly, avoiding conversation, avoiding me. Guilt has a sound to it when people move too fast and won't meet your eyes. I stayed seated. That was when the side door opened. She didn't rush in. She didn't announce herself. Emily stepped inside like she belonged there because she did. My daughter stood near the wall, hands folded, eyes steady. She looked older than the last time I'd seen her. Stronger. The years had done to her what prison had done to me in a different way, stripped away softness, left clarity. "Dad," she said softly. My chest tightened. "Emily," Maxwell glanced at her, then at me. "She's the one who contacted me," he said. Emily nodded. "I started digging the day you were sentenced," she said. "Logan thought I was grieving. Thought I'd keep my head down." She walked closer and placed a folder on the table. "I followed the money," she continued. "Found the medical records, found the shell companies, found the emails he forgot to delete." I stared at the folder. All this time, I'd believed I was alone. I couldn't save you then, she said, voice breaking just slightly. But I promised myself I'd be ready when you got out. I stood up and pulled her into an embrace. She didn't cry. Neither did I. Some reunions don't need tears. They need acknowledgement. In that moment, surrounded by glass and steel, I realized something profound. I hadn't lost my family. I'd lost a son, and I'd gained the truth, the consequences that couldn't be undone. The indictments came quietly. No cameras, no speeches, just envelopes delivered by couriers who didn't care about names or legacies. Charges stacked neatly on legal paper, perjury, conspiracy, financial crimes, each one heavier than the last. Logan's wife was arrested first. At her arraignment, the judge read the medical findings aloud. Dates, signatures, confirmations. The same facts that once saved her performance now dismantled it piece by piece. Bail was denied. She didn't look at anyone as they led her away. Logan followed a week later. He tried to bargain, offered cooperation, names, explanations that arrived years too late. Prosecutors listened without sympathy. Some deals can't be made once the damage crosses a certain line. I attended none of the hearings, not out of cruelty but clarity. Emily kept me informed in short updates. It's proceeding. The evidence is strong. It will take time. Time didn't frighten me anymore. I'd learned what patience could do when used correctly. One afternoon, Maxwell asked the question everyone else avoided. "Do you want to make a statement?" he said. "Public forgiveness. Closure." I considered it. Then I shook my head. "I've said enough. Silence," I'd learned, can be more honest than absolution. Forgiveness, offered too easily, becomes permission rewritten as virtue. When the final plea was entered, I stood by the window in my office and watched the city move on. Cars flowed. People hurried. Life didn't pause for justice. That was okay. Justice, I realized, doesn't need applause. It needs completion. And with that chapter closing, another choice waited, one that had nothing to do with courts or consequences, and everything to do with how I would live the years I had left. What I chose to keep. I didn't keep the office. That surprised people. They assumed I'd reclaim everything: corner office, reserved parking, the symbols of victory that looked good from the outside. But when the papers were finalized and the company stabilized under new leadership, I walked away. Emily understood without me explaining. We met at a small cafe near the river, the kind of place where no one cared who you used to be. She asked what I wanted to do next, not as my daughter, but as a woman who had learned to ask honest questions. "I want quiet," I told her, so I downsized. A modest place with wide windows and no history attached to the walls. I donated most of what I owned, gave away suits I'd worn to meetings that no longer mattered, kept only what felt true: books, a few photographs, the watch my father gave me when I built my first company. At night, I slept without replaying courtrooms in my head. That was new. I began walking in the mornings, along the river path, counting steps not to mark time lost, but to feel time moving forward. Strangers nodded. Dogs barked. The world continued, indifferent and generous at the same time. Emily visited often. We talked about small things: work, weather, plans that didn't involve strategy or defense. Once, she asked if I missed Logan. I thought about it carefully. "I miss who he was," I said. "Not who he chose to become." She nodded. No judgment, just understanding. I had lost years. I had lost a son, but I hadn't lost myself. And that, I realized, was the one victory no one could ever take from me. The letters and the question of forgiveness. The letters arrived in a plain brown envelope. No return address, no warning. Emily handed them to me without a word. She didn't need to explain where they came from. I already knew. Logan's handwriting hadn't changed. Careful, controlled. The same way he used to write birthday cards when he was young, back when apologies came easily and consequences felt far away. I didn't open them right away. I set the envelope on the table and let it sit there for days, passing it each morning like a quiet challenge. Forgiveness is often talked about as a virtue, but no one tells you how heavy it feels when it's finally offered a place in your hands. One evening, I opened the first letter. He wrote about regret, about fear, about how things spiraled faster than he could control. He wrote that he never meant for it to go that far. I believed him, and I also knew it didn't change the truth. The second letter asked for forgiveness. The third asked for contact. I folded them carefully and placed them back in the envelope. Forgiveness, I realized, is not a transaction. It's not something you give to free someone else from guilt. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to let hatred take up space where peace is trying to grow. I forgave him quietly, without ceremony, but I did not respond. Some bridges aren't burned in anger. They're set down gently, because crossing them again would only lead you back to the same place. I placed the envelope in a drawer and closed it, not in bitterness, in acceptance, looking back without anger. I don't replay the prison days the way I used to. Not the clang of metal doors, not the nights when sleep refused to come, not even the moment my son raised his hand in court and sealed my fate with a lie. Those memories still exist, but they no longer demand my attention. Time has a way of rearranging pain. It doesn't erase it. It puts it in its proper place. I can now look back and see the full shape of what happened. Not just the cruelty of it, but the clarity it forced on me. I see the mistakes I made long before the trial, the warning signs I dismissed, the excuses I accepted because facing the truth felt harder than carrying it. I thought being a good father meant protecting my son at all costs. I was wrong. Being a good father, I've learned, also means knowing when to stop shielding someone from the consequences of their own choices, especially when those choices destroy others. I lost 2 years of my life. I lost my reputation. I lost a son I thought I knew. But I gained something I didn't expect myself. The version of me that walked out of prison wasn't weaker. He was clearer, less concerned with appearances, less willing to sacrifice truth for peace. As the sun sets now, I don't ask what might have been. I ask something far simpler. What kind of life do I choose next? And for the first time in a very long time, the answer doesn't feel heavy. It feels honest. The day I chose my own freedom. On quiet mornings, I sit by the window and watch the city wake up. People rush past with coffee cups and plans, unaware of how fragile everything really is. I don't envy them. I don't judge them either. I simply notice, and noticing, I've learned, is a kind of freedom. I lost 2 years to concrete walls and lies spoken with a straight face. I lost a son to ambition dressed up as loyalty. But I didn't lose my life. I reclaimed it. Freedom isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision to stop letting pain decide who you become. I live simply now. I choose honesty over appearances, peace over permission. And when the past knocks, because it still does sometimes, I answer without fear, then let it go. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Truly. Stories like this only matter when they're shared, when they become mirrors instead of spectacles. Now, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Which moment in this story stayed with you the most and why? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and protecting yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. If this story resonated, please subscribe and share it with someone who might need the courage to choose themselves today. In the next video, I'll tell another story, another family, another betrayal, but the same hard truth. Freedom begins the moment you stop living for someone else's lie. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, the day you choose your own freedom can change everything.